Hello, I'm Kevin Benedict, Senior Vice President of Solution Strategy with Regalix, and this is Deep Dive, and I want to thank everyone out there for joining us. In this episode, my guest is the CEO and co-founder of Ubimo, and his name is, let me say it right, Ran Ben-Yair. How's that, Ran?
Yeah, that's a good job.
I kind of stumbled through the first part, but forgive me for that. Okay, so I'm looking at your beard and I'm looking at mine, and I'm thinking that probably takes you 5 hours to grow that beard. What do you think?
Pretty much a day. This is me going into winter mode here in Brooklyn.
Do you know what? I can grow a beard just like that in never. So I have beard envy. So anyway, I want to welcome you here with us today. Where are you calling in from, Ram?
We're based in New York.
Okay.
Yeah.
And have you always been in New York, or did you come over from somewhere else?
Yeah. So the company was founded in Israel about over 6 years ago, and then we opened the U.S. office about 4 years ago, and I personally moved about two and a half years ago. Okay,
wonderful. So tell me, what was the vision when you started the company, and how has that evolved over the past 6 years?
Sure. So we founded Ubimo. I mean, the founding team, we go a while back in the mobile space. In our previous roles and previous companies, we've always been around the mobile ecosystem. And 6 years ago, we were looking at the mobile and digital ecosystems. And obviously, everybody was seeing the shift into in-app environments, and there was this whole frenzy about how do we replicate what we have on desktop? Let's just do it on mobile. And we thought that, it's crazy that, for the first time in history, everybody is walking around with a device sending location signals. And instead of looking at Kevin and saying, okay, so where you are and what you're doing and trying to learn from that about you, everybody was trying to analyze what you're doing just on your phone, what types of games or how often you're checking the weather. So, for us, it seemed obvious that there is an obvious, use case for the data to really understand about and have a glimpse into people's behavior in the real world.
Okay, so if I understand this right, there's some things that you're doing on your app, but a lot of times you might be sitting on a bus doing stuff on the app that really has nothing to do with what you're doing in the real world. In the real world, you're going to work, or you're going shopping, or you're going on holiday. Am I understanding that right?
Exactly. So there's actually a much more, it's an interesting signal about your behavior that you are missing completely if you're just looking at the online or digital experience.
Got it. So you use a term in location intelligence. So, and that's the kind of the focus of your company, if I understood that right from your website and your background. Talk to me about what location intelligence means to us and how can it be used?
So, location intelligence is essentially the transformation of mobile and raw location data into an understanding about consumer behavior. So it's taking in raw data like timestamps and locations and coordinates, and turning that into a semantic understanding of a person experience, something that we as humans can understand. And essentially, it's kind of bridging the gap between the digital and the physical world in a seamless way. So you can now have a look into the entire consumer journey, regardless if they're doing something on their device or visiting a specific retail location. It's the same from the location intelligence perspective.
Okay, so is the location intelligence just one attribute that you're combining with other databases and other information?
No, so it's more than one attribute because it requires a completely different stack and understanding of how to process that data. It does connect well into other digital data points once you kind of process the data and turn it into something that you can tie to a specific identifier, then you now have the ability to look at both the physical behavior and the digital behavior for a single individual.
Okay, so what markets are you going after? Who's interested and who's buying?
So essentially, the product that we have is it's a SaaS platform. Essentially, it's a self-service platform that companies use in a variety of different use cases. So anything from kind of pure business intelligence, so looking at my retail locations versus my competitors to see where I'm winning or losing, to digital data management. So let's say you want to build and work with audiences based on behavior. So let's say I want all the people who shop at Whole Foods and also go twice a week to the gym because I need to do something with that data. And it can be also, activating and actually taking decisions based on that data. So anything from buying media to running attribution reports or, planning. So it's a very, I would say, varied tool sets for location intelligence. And our clients are typically coming from more on the marketing side, but we're seeing it expanding more and more into consumer analytics, data analytics, and more on the IT department side of things.
Okay, so traditionally, there's been location data called location-based services, LBS, that is the acronym a lot of us are familiar with, and that was tied to advertising. So you're opening the door there and saying there's a lot more use to it outside of just that. Can you give me some use cases on where location intelligence might be valuable?
Sure. So just tying back to your original comment, it is, the evolution. What we've seen is that location-based services, which kind of exploded with, introduction of smartphone, really created a whole new set of data and signals that are now available. So people start to collect location data. And yes, the first use case was kind of the first generation was let's use it for real time, for targeting. I want to reach a consumer while they're at a Walmart. That's a pretty kind of no-brainer once you have that data. But as data started to accumulate, you can now start to analyze and build a whole level of analytics stack on top of that to analyze behaviors. And that became something that is, or started to be more applicable in other industries that are not necessarily trying to target someone in real time. So one example of an industry that really transformed the way it's doing business is what we call out of home. So essentially signage, billboards, what used to be typically kind of more a real estate business. So you own a piece of property, you try to sell it, and it started from, okay, let's look at how many eyeballs we think we see there, to let's do some statistics about the neighborhood. And now we got to a point where they can do the reverse. They can say, okay, you tell me which audience you're trying to reach. I'll show you which billboards over-index with that specific audience and where you need to place your ads and when. And it's becoming much more digitized and data-driven. And that's really transforming an industry that's been, working for decades in a very kind of, old-fashioned way.
Oh man, I can see the vision now. So in the morning, there's the commuters and there's a demographic represented by that demographic pattern. So it has one kind of ad appealing to those driving into work in the morning. In the evening, you have a different same people maybe, but a different mindset. So you advertise something different. During the middle of the day, that's another different demographic driving by. And so you can change the advertising for that. Weekends, maybe the advertising changes. So instead of having workmen out there with glue and posters rolling that up on a signboard, you can instantly change that based upon the demographic patterns driving by. Is that what we're seeing?
Exactly. We're seeing, both the data-driven approach and now also the digitization of those assets. But think about even further. So it doesn't have to be just on the highway. Now you can say, okay, but I know where these people live. So let's do also in those specific neighborhoods. You can really focus your campaign in a much more effective and targeted way to what used to be like a very, very broad kind of types of messaging.
Wow. So let's stop right here for a moment. We'll come back to some more use cases, but let me ask you right now, how are you getting the data? Like, where's the data coming from?
So essentially, when we're talking about location data, there's actually two types of location data, and people tend to mix those up. So there are two fundamental building blocks. One, you have to have an understanding of the world itself. So there is the mapping data and the mapping component, which you would assume is already a solved problem, but it's not. It's really a very complex problem to solve. So we have our own pipelines that are analyzing multiple different data sources. So anything from looking at license data from businesses, to open source data from governments and city planning, to events and anything you can tie to a specific venue. We are actually analyzing and aggregating in a single index. And what we're doing is we're actually looking at the shapes of the buildings themselves. So it's not just enough to know that there is a venue at a specific address. You have to actually understand how that building looks like in order to really understand if people are spending time there. So that's one side of the tech stack. The other side is, how do you get data about devices? Going back to the previous question, 5-6 years ago, the majority of data was coming in real time through ad requests that applications were sending. But today, there is more and more data available to purchase directly from the applications or SDKs that are collecting the data. So essentially, we have a panel of about 40 to 50 million daily active users here in the US that we get data on a daily basis. And when you combine these two assets, you can now start to connect the dots and start looking at patterns and behaviors.
Oh, that's fascinating. Let's get back to some more use cases then. Sure. That Clear Channel is brilliant. So what other use cases are you seeing out there?
So what we're seeing is that, and I think it all ties to a very basic concept of expanding your view of the consumer journey beyond your touch points. So a couple of examples, we're now working with an airline, and they were looking at their frequent flyers, and what we were able to show them that yes, those people travel with you a lot. Close to 67 or 70% of their travel was with you, but now they have a glimpse into the other 30%, which is a significant part. Now you can actually start to understand where and when these people are going to. So maybe you can have a better decision in terms of what routes you need to invest in, or how can you get more seats filled in specific routes. So again, giving you the ability to look at behaviors beyond what you would normally see as a business owner.
Wow, fascinating. Any others you want to share before we move on?
So another example, which again talks more about the planning side of things. So a public transportation company trying to optimize routes, again, looking at the data that they have, they can only see the demand. So how many people are getting on the bus and where they're going to. Now they can look at the entire neighborhood and see, so let's see where and when they're going, so we can actually understand the behaviors, where they need to get to. So again, looking at patterns and data in aggregate, and also tying back to kind of the more, I would say, the marketing use cases. So think about now you can actually do promotions in a way that makes sense in a much more personalized way. So you can actually, if you have a new product, so we're now working with a company that's trying to promote kind of a healthy type of CPG brand, they can now, instead of just blasting and going out to stores and doing demo cards and all that stuff, they can now look, let's choose an audience that we know is the target for that specific product, and we can now plan in which areas do we want to place it, how do we do the promotions, which audiences we're reaching. So it's a much more data-driven approach, and how do you create a personalized and customized experience as much as you can for any single product.
And listening to you describe these different use cases, it seems to me that in addition to these use cases, as the subscription economy continues to evolve, and you're not just doing these one-time transactions at the beginning, but you need to support a client monthly for years and years, that it seems like it would be more important for location analytics to help you provide the best service all year long, and as long as the subscriber is part of your business. Are you seeing that same kind of thing from your perspective?
Yeah, I think in general, if we think about it, it's more about the consumer expectations are now higher with the subscription economy, in a sense that they expect us to know more about them and to personalize and make their experience delightful, and they're willing to share the data in order to enable that. So businesses now cannot afford not to understand the experience, so they have to have the best view that they can get into the entire consumer journey. And that's why we're seeing a lot of companies investing now in building their own data stacks. And actually, if we think about it more broadly, they're basically building their knowledge base. And we're seeing it kind of in a reaction to kind of the walled garden type of kind of anti-movement. So they're trying to build more and more data assets in-house. So I think it ties to both of these trends, in a sense that anything that you can do to provide better information about your consumers, it really improves their ability to provide services.
Oh yes, I can see the ability to personalize an experience is easier. The ability to understand the context that somebody is in at that time and be able to provide better services based on that information. That's fascinating. So talk to us as we're wrapping this up. Talk to us about your technology stack, Ran.
Yeah.
What's it look like?
So as I mentioned, there are like two big parts that are running constantly. So one is we have pipelines that are running and analyzing data about the world. So we talked about the venue data. There's also real-time data. You have to understand weather. You have to understand events. So you can really do a granular semantic understanding. So this is someone at a yoga class at a gym, right? That's a specific experience, not a specific place. So we have that part of the stack which is constantly running, and then the big part is actually how do you ingest all the raw location data, and then we need to clean it out. So first of all, we have to kind of throw data that is inaccurate or not enough. We don't have enough confidence in terms of that signal, and transform that into understanding of sessions and dwell time. So essentially, we're mapping visits to the entire US on a daily basis. So it's a pretty kind of large scale pipeline that we're running, and that enables our client to have a kind of a self-service UI and an analytic suite on top of that. You can get answers in real time, so you can actually build custom segments and custom queries and get that data instantly because we already process it for you.
Oh, that's terrific. So let's look into the future. Ran, how do you see your space around location intelligence evolving over the next 3 years, say?
So what we envision is really, as I mentioned, the location intelligence, if you think about it, it's a bridge between digital and physical. And that bridge will become essential across anyone who's collecting data and anyone who's looking at consumers in general. So we're seeing it now expanding beyond kind of the pure marketing role of data into anything from city planning, transportation, travel, security, finance, all of it. Any business that is building their own data architecture and stack will require that extension. So we're seeing that we're seeing this becoming, as I said, kind of a seamless part of any data stack going forward and expanding beyond the marketing realm where it's mostly being used today.
Ran, I want to thank you so much for sharing your experience, your insight, your innovative business and business model with all of us. It's going to open our minds on how location analytics can be done and location intelligence. So again, Ran, thanks for the interview today.
Thanks for taking the time. Thank you.
Absolutely. And I want to thank everyone out there that's watching for joining us today.
Thanks.